Plus all updates. I am forced to hide in closets in my own home because my husband's entitled parents moved in temporarily. I never thought I'd be writing this from inside a bedroom closet, but here we are. My husband and I just bought our first home in Ohio 3 months ago. We were so proud, scrimped and saved for years working jobs we hated just to get that down payment together. The house isn't huge, but it's ours, and we were excited to start our lives together as newlyweds. Then my in-laws called. They were moving to Ohio to be closer to us and needed a place to stay just until they found their own place. My husband didn't even ask me before saying yes. He just assumed I'd be fine with it because family helps family. I wasn't thrilled, but figured a few weeks wouldn't kill us. That was 5 weeks ago. My father-in-law hasn't applied for a single job. Every day he has a new excuse. The market is tough. Nobody's hiring in my field. I need to update my resume first. Meanwhile, he sits on our couch watching conspiracy theory videos all day and leaving his dirty dishes everywhere. My mother-in-law at least helps with cooking, but she's constantly rearranging my kitchen and telling me I'm doing it wrong when I cook anything. I found credit card statements in the trash last week. They're over $50,000 in debt. They have no retirement savings at 60, nothing. And yet my mother-in-law came home yesterday with shopping bags from expensive stores. When I casually asked about her shopping trip, she said, "Retail therapy keeps me sane." Last night was the breaking point. I came home from my nursing shift, 12 hours on my feet, to find they'd invited friends over without telling us. 6 random people I'd never met were drinking our alcohol and eating food we paid for. Our guest bedroom, which used to be my home office, is now filled with their belongings. They've basically moved in permanently without ever discussing it. My husband keeps saying they're family whenever I bring it up. We've had 3 fights about it already. The last one ended with him saying I was being selfish and didn't understand because my parents are well off. They're teachers who live modestly, but aren't in crushing debt. This morning, I had to take a work call and literally hid in this closet because my father-in-law was loudly arguing with someone on the phone about politics in the living room. I work from home 2 days a week and have no space to myself anymore. I love my husband, but I didn't sign up to support his parents financially for the rest of our lives. They don't even have health insurance. His mom casually mentioned how expensive her medications are yesterday. How do I get my husband to understand this isn't sustainable without making him feel like he has to choose between his wife and his parents? Here is the update. So I took the advice you guys gave me, and let me tell you, this got super intense. I tried really hard to at least make this an entertaining read for everyone to enjoy. I hope I did my story justice. After lunch, I pulled Jason into our bedroom and tried again to talk about the situation. "We need to set a timeline for your parents to find their own place," I said as calmly as possible. Jason sighed like I was being unreasonable. "They're still getting settled, Alyssa. Dad's looking for work. It's not easy at his age." "Is he though? Is he actually looking? Because all I see is him watching YouTube all day," I countered. Jason's face hardened. "He's networking, making connections. You don't understand how it works in his industry. His industry being middle management at a company that went bankrupt 2 years ago. And what about the credit card debt? And Barbara's shopping sprees? And the fact that they invited people over without asking us?" I was trying to keep my voice down, but it was getting harder by the second. Jason ran his hand through his hair, something he does when he's frustrated. "Look, they're going through a tough time. Dad lost his job, they had to sell their house at a loss, and now they're starting over in a new state. Can't you just be a little more understanding?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a deep breath and tried a different approach. "I am trying to be understanding, but we need boundaries. This is our house, Jason. We just got married. We just bought this place. We need our space. They're not going to be here forever," he said, but he wouldn't look me in the eye. That's when I knew he was lying, or at least he wasn't being honest with himself. "How long then? A month? 2? 6? I need a timeline," I insisted. Jason threw up his hands. "I don't know. Until Dad finds a job and they can afford their own place. Why are you being so difficult about this?" And there it was. I was the difficult one. I was the problem, not the in-laws who showed up with no plan and were making themselves comfortable in our home indefinitely. I had to get out of there before I said something I'd regret. I grabbed my purse and keys and told Jason I was going for a drive. As I was leaving, I overheard Barbara telling Frank they should look into getting a Costco membership since they'd be here for the foreseeable future. My blood boiled. I drove to my friend Taylor's apartment and vented for an hour. Taylor, bless her, listened patiently, and then asked the question I'd been avoiding. What if they never leave? I didn't have an answer. The thought of living like this indefinitely made me want to cry. Taylor suggested I try one more time to talk to Jason, but this time with a concrete plan. Offer to help them find an apartment. Set a deadline. Be firm but kind, she advised. When I got home, Frank and Barbara were watching TV in the living room. They barely acknowledged me when I walked in. Jason was in the kitchen making dinner, or rather, helping Barbara make dinner, since she'd taken over that duty too. I spent the evening researching apartments in our area that might be within their budget, whatever that is. They haven't been forthcoming about their finances. I made a list of places they could apply to, even found a few that were offering move-in specials. I printed everything out and put it in a folder to show Jason later. That night in bed, I tried to bring it up again. "I found some really nice apartments that might work for your parents," I started. Jason Jason immediately tensed up. Can we not do this right now? I'm tired. When then? Because this can't continue, Jason. I'm hiding in closets to take work calls. I have no office anymore. Your dad is talking about golf memberships like he's retiring here. We need to address this. Jason rolled away from me. Tomorrow. We'll talk tomorrow. But tomorrow came and went. And the next day. And the next. Each time I tried to bring it up, Jason found a reason to postpone the conversation. Meanwhile, more of Frank and Barbara's belongings appeared in our house. A recliner that Frank had in storage was suddenly in our living room. Barbara's collection of ceramic birds took over our mantle. Every day, it seemed like another piece of their life was being permanently installed in our home, while pieces of our own life together were being pushed aside or packed away. By the end of the week, I was at my breaking point. I decided I needed to take matters into my own hands. I scheduled a family meeting for Sunday afternoon. I texted everyone, including Frank and Barbara, making it clear that attendance was mandatory. Jason called me immediately after getting the text. "What's this about a family meeting?" he asked, sounding annoyed. "We need to talk about the living situation. All of us. Together. It's been 6 weeks, Jason. 6 weeks of what was supposed to be a temporary arrangement." He was quiet for a moment. "Fine, but don't ambush my parents, okay? They're sensitive about their situation." Sunday arrived, and I was ready. I had my folder of apartment listings, information about job fairs in the area, and even a written offer to pay their first month's rent if they signed a lease within the next 8 weeks. I thought I was being more than generous. We all gathered in the living room after lunch. Frank and Barbara sat on the couch, looking uncomfortable. Jason perched on the arm of the couch next to his mom, leaving me to sit alone in the armchair across from them. It felt like 3 against 1, which I guess it was. I took a deep breath and started as gently as I could. "I wanted to talk about the living arrangement we have going on. It's been 6 weeks now since you moved in, and I think it's time we discuss a plan for moving forward." Frank immediately crossed his arms defensively. Barbara's smile became fixed and tight. Jason looked at the floor. "We've loved having you here," I continued, trying to sound sincere. "But Jason and I are newlyweds, and we bought this house expecting to start our lives together, just the two of us." I pulled out my folder. "I've found some great apartments nearby that might work for you. I've even put together information about upcoming job fairs and—" "Are you kicking us out?" Barbara interrupted, her voice quivering slightly. She looked at Jason with wide eyes. "Jason, is she kicking us out?" Jason shot me a look of betrayal. "No, Mom. Nobody's kicking anyone out. Alyssa just wants to discuss options." Frank leaned forward, his face red. "We're not in a position to get our own place right now. I'm still looking for work. The economy is terrible. Do you know how hard it is for someone my age to find a job?" I tried to stay calm. "I understand it's challenging, but it's been 6 weeks and I haven't seen you apply for anything. I'm happy to help with your resume or practice interviews if that would be helpful." "I don't need help with my resume," Frank snapped. "I was managing people before you were born." The conversation deteriorated from there. Barbara started crying. Frank got louder. Jason kept trying to placate everyone without actually addressing the issue. In the end, the only thing we agreed on was to have weekly progress check-ins where Frank would update us on his job search and they would report on apartment hunting efforts. It wasn't the outcome I'd hoped for, but it was something. A framework, at least. I felt a tiny bit of hope that maybe, just maybe, this nightmare would eventually end. That night, Jason and I had another fight. He accused me of blindsiding his parents and making them feel unwelcome. I reminded him that this was supposed to be temporary and that I'd been more than patient. We went to bed angry, backs turned to each other, the gulf between us widening. The first weekly check-in was a joke. Frank claimed he had bronchitis and couldn't possibly look for work while sick. Barbara said she'd looked at a few apartments online, but they were all too expensive or in bad neighborhoods. No progress was made. The second week, Frank said he'd pulled his rotator cuff helping a neighbor move a couch. What neighbor? We'd only been in the house 3 months and I barely knew anyone and couldn't type up applications. Barbara blamed Mercury retrograde for their lack of apartment hunting success. I'm not even kidding. By the third week, I'd stopped expecting any real progress. I was right not to get my hopes up. Frank claimed his bronchitis had returned. Barbara said all the good apartments were being snatched up too quickly for them to even view them. Each excuse was more ridiculous than the last, and Jason seemed to accept them without question, nodding sympathetically while I sat there biting my tongue until I tasted blood. I started noticing other concerning signs. Mail addressed to Frank and Barbara was piling up on our counter. Not just a few letters, weeks worth. One afternoon while they were out at their senior center, which they now attended 3 times a week, I sorted through the mail and found something that made my stomach drop. A postal change of address form confirming that they had officially changed their address to our house. Not as a temporary forwarding address, but as their permanent residence. That was it. I'd had enough. I took several steps that day that I knew would cause drama, but felt necessary. First, I canceled the grocery store debit card I'd given Barbara to help with food shopping. Then I moved all their overflow boxes from around the house into the garage and sealed them with packing tape. Finally, I printed out an Ohio-compliant 30-day tenancy termination notice and stuck it to the refrigerator with a magnet. When they returned home and saw what I'd done, all hell broke loose. Barbara burst into tears. Frank started yelling about family loyalty. Jason came home in the middle of it and looked at the notice on the fridge like I'd posted hate speech. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, ripping it off the refrigerator. "It's a legal notice giving your parents 30 days to find another place to live," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I found their change of address form, Jason. They've made our address their permanent residence without discussing it with us." Jason looked at his parents, who suddenly became very interested in the floor. "Is that true?" he asked them. Barbara sniffled. "We just didn't want to bother with changing it again when we found a place. It's such a hassle with the post office." I didn't believe her for a second, and from the look on Jason's face, he didn't either. But then something shifted in his expression. He crumpled up the notice and threw it in the trash. "This is my house too," he said coldly, "and I say they can stay as long as they need to." That night, Jason dragged a futon mattress into the living room and started making it up with sheets and blankets. When I asked what he was doing, he wouldn't look at me. "Mom and Dad need a more comfortable place to sleep. The guest bed is too small for both of them." I stared at him in disbelief. "So you're giving them our living room now too? Where are we supposed to relax? Watch TV?" He shrugged. "We can watch in our bedroom." I felt like I was losing my mind. "Jason, this is insane. They've taken over our entire house. They have no intention of leaving." He finally looked at me, his eyes hard. "Their family, Alyssa. I'm not going to throw them out on the street because you want your precious space." I went to bed alone that night, listening to the sounds of Frank's loud snoring from the living room. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how my life had come to this, wondering if my marriage could survive this invasion, wondering if I even wanted it to. The next morning, I woke up to find Jason moving boxes into our bedroom. Not small boxes, large plastic totes and metal toolboxes I'd never seen before. "What is all this?" I asked, still groggy from a restless night. "Dad's tools," Jason replied, stacking another box in the corner. "He needs somewhere to store them, and our bedroom is the only option? What about the garage?" "The garage is full of their other stuff. You put it there, remember?" I counted to 10 in my head. "Jason, this has to stop. They're taking over our entire house." He ignored me and brought in another box. By the time I left for my shift at the hospital, our bedroom looked like a storage unit. I had to climb over boxes just to get to my closet, which was quickly becoming the only space in the house that was truly mine. I left the hospital that evening with a knot in my stomach. The whole drive home, I kept thinking about those mysterious toolboxes. Since when did Frank have so many tools? The man could barely change a light bulb without complaining about his back. Something wasn't adding up. The traffic was unusually heavy for a weeknight, giving me more time to ruminate on the strange developments at home. Every red light seemed to last an eternity, each one providing another opportunity for my mind to race through increasingly concerning scenarios. What had started as a simple request for my in-laws to find their own place had somehow spiraled into this bizarre situation with toolboxes appearing everywhere. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the Wi-Fi wasn't connecting on my phone. Great, another thing to deal with. I trudged inside, already dreading whatever new surprise awaited me. The familiar weight of my nursing scrubs felt heavier than usual after the 12-hour shift I'd just completed. All I wanted was a hot shower and some peace and quiet, but I had a sinking feeling neither would be forthcoming. Frank and Barbara were sitting in the living room on their futon-turned bed, watching some game show at full volume. They barely acknowledged me when I walked in. Jason was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Jason?" I asked, raising my voice over the TV. Barbara glanced up, her eyes barely meeting mine before returning to the screen. "Oh, he's in the basement setting up Frank's workshop." Workshop? Workshop? I nearly lost it right there. The basement had been my planned home office space, somewhere I could complete my charting in peace when I needed to work from home. We'd discussed this extensively when buying the house. Instead, I took a deep breath and headed downstairs, my footsteps heavy on the wooden stairs that creaked under my weight. Sure enough, Jason was arranging power tools on a workbench that definitely hadn't been there this morning. The space had been transformed in a matter of hours. Sawdust already covered the floor I'd vacuumed just days ago, and the walls were lined with pegboards displaying an impressive array of tools. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level despite the shock of seeing our basement so completely altered. Jason barely looked up from organizing a set of drill bits. "Dad needs a place to work on his projects." "What projects? Since when is your dad into woodworking?" I gestured around at the professional-grade equipment that surrounded us. "He's always been into it," Jason said defensively, finally turning to face me. "He just didn't have time before retirement." Retirement? So now we were pretending Frank was retired, not unemployed? The distinction might seem semantic to some, but retired implied a lifetime of work, followed by a well-earned rest. Frank had been fired from his last 3 jobs for what he called personality conflicts, but what I suspected was simply an inability to follow basic workplace protocols. I bit my tongue and went back upstairs, needing to check my email and figure out what was going on with the Wi-Fi. The conversation clearly wasn't going anywhere productive. "The internet's not working," I said to no one in particular as I re-entered the living room, where the game show had been replaced by an equally loud reality TV program. Frank muted the TV for once, an action so unexpected it momentarily threw me off balance. Oh, Jason reset everything, said something about security. The new password is on that sticky note by the router. I found the note stuck haphazardly to the side of our router. Family First 2023. Subtle, Jason. Real subtle. The message wasn't lost on me, a clear indication of where his priorities now lay. After connecting, I checked my email and found nothing unusual. But when I tried to log into our online banking, my password didn't work. I tried again, carefully typing each character, certain I was entering the correct information. Still nothing. A cold sensation began spreading through my chest as I requested a password reset, but the confirmation email never came through. That's when I noticed my bank alerts had been turned off in my settings. When did that happen? I grabbed my phone and called the bank directly, retreating to our bedroom for privacy. After navigating the automated system and waiting on hold for what felt like an eternity, I finally reached a customer service representative. After verifying my identity, the customer service rep confirmed what I feared. Someone had changed my alert settings 3 days ago, and there had been activity on the account. Can you tell me what transactions have occurred in the last week? I asked, my heart pounding so loudly I worried it might be audible through the phone. The rep listed off several normal purchases, groceries, gas, a payment to the electric company, then paused. There were also 3 transfers to an external account in the amounts of $800, $1,200, and $1,200 on Monday, Wednesday, and today. $3,200 total, to an account I knew nothing about. I asked for the account details, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rising panic. It's registered to a user named Jason Tooltime, the rep said, completely unaware of how those words were shattering my world. I felt sick. Jason had been transferring our money without telling me. For tools? I thanked the rep, reset all my passwords, and turned the alerts back on, this time to my work email which Jason couldn't access. That night, I pretended everything was fine. I made small talk at dinner, smiled at Barbara's critiques of my chicken casserole, it's a bit dry, dear, and could use more seasoning, and nodded politely when Frank launched into a rant about property taxes. Inside, I was seething, each pleasant word I spoke feeling like a betrayal to myself. After dinner, I told Jason I had charting to finish and retreated to our bedroom. Instead of working, I started digging. I logged into our credit monitoring service from my hospital's VPN, figuring Jason wouldn't be able to track my activity that way. What I found made my blood run cold. A $15,000 line of credit had been opened at Ohio Regional Credit Union 2 weeks ago, in my name, with my e-signature, an e-signature I never provided. The application had been completed online, with all my personal information entered correctly, social security number, date of birth, employment details. Someone who knew everything about me had done this, someone I trusted. I dug deeper, scrolling through the transaction history with increasing horror. The funds had been withdrawn immediately after approval, transferred to an account I didn't recognize. The stated purpose? Home improvement. Those damn tools. The next morning, I woke up to an email from HR. Confirmation of your leave request, the subject line read. I opened it, confused. I hadn't requested any leave. This email confirms your request for 3 weeks of unpaid personal leave beginning next Monday, it read. As discussed, this exceeds your available PTO, so it will be processed as unpaid time. I nearly dropped my phone. I never requested leave. Never discussed it with HR. Someone had accessed my work account and done this behind my back. Before I could even process this, my phone buzzed with a real estate alert. I'd set up notifications months ago when we were first house hunting, but hadn't bothered to disable them after we purchased our home. The alert showed a new listing in our neighborhood. I opened it absently, thinking perhaps one of our neighbors was selling, when my own address jumped out at me. Our address was listed as new listing, must sell, on a discount real estate website. The listing included interior photos of our house, photos I'd never seen before. Someone had been taking pictures when I wasn't home. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the listing. The description emphasized motivated sellers and priced for quick sale. I clicked through to the listing details and found the contact information. Jason Miller, power of attorney for Alyssa Miller. Power of attorney? I never gave Jason power of attorney. This was forgery, fraud, criminal. The room seemed to spin around me as the full scope of what was happening became clear. This wasn't just about tools or a workshop. This was a calculated plan to liquidate our assets, my assets, and disappear. I called in sick to work for the first time in years. I needed to figure out what the hell was going on. While Jason was in the shower, I searched his nightstand and found a document folder hidden under some magazines. Inside was a power of attorney form with what was supposed to be my signature. The signature was convincing enough that it might pass a cursory inspection by someone who wasn't familiar with my handwriting. but anyone who knew my signature well would immediately spot the discrepancies in the letter formation and flow. I photographed everything with my phone, carefully documenting each page, then put it back exactly as I found it. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to move methodically, ensuring nothing appeared disturbed. Next, I went to the garage to look through those sealed boxes of Frank and Barbara's belongings. In the third box I opened, buried under winter clothes, I found my passport, birth certificate, and our marriage license. Things that had been in our fireproof safe, things Jason shouldn't have moved without telling me. At the bottom of the box was a printout of a one-way ticket to Tampa, Florida, in Jason's name. Departure date, 3 weeks from now. Right when my unpaid leave was supposed to start. The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. Jason wasn't just stealing from me. He was planning to abandon me entirely. I heard the garage door opening and quickly shoved everything back in the box, resealing it as best I could. Jason stood in the doorway, frowning. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, suspicion clear in his voice. I forced a smile, hoping the fear and anger churning inside me wasn't visible on my face. "Just looking for my winter boots. Thought they might be in one of these boxes." He didn't look convinced. "Your boots are in the hall closet. You put them there last month." "Oh, right," I said, standing up and dusting off my pants. "Pregnancy brain, I guess." His eyes widened. "You're pregnant?" I laughed, trying to sound casual while inwardly cursing myself for the slip. A pregnancy would complicate his plans significantly. No, just a joke. You know how forgetful I've been lately." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Right. Well, I'm heading to meet Dad for breakfast. We're going to look at some tools he needs. More tools, of course." After Jason left, I installed phone mirroring software on his device while he was in the shower. It was something we'd discussed using for emergencies when one of us was on call, but never implemented. I figured identity theft and fraud constituted an emergency. That afternoon, I got my first glimpse into what was really happening. Jason, Frank, and Barbara met someone at a coffee shop downtown. The mirroring software picked up their conversation through Jason's phone, which he'd placed on the table between them. "Kelsey thinks we can get at least $280,000 for the house in this market," Jason was saying. "That's $30,000 more than we paid. After we pay off the mortgage and roll your debts into the refinance, we should walk away with about $80,000 cash." Kelsey, Jason's college girlfriend, the one he'd dated for 3 years before meeting me, the one he'd assured me was ancient history, now apparently a real estate agent helping him sell our house out from under me. "And Alyssa doesn't suspect anything?" This was Barbara, her voice dripping with fake concern. The same woman who had hugged me just yesterday and thanked me for being such a wonderful daughter-in-law. "She's clueless," Jason replied, his dismissive tone cutting through me like a knife. "Thinks we're just helping Dad set up a little hobby workshop. She has no idea about the tools or the online business." "Online business?" This was the first I'd heard of any business. "What about the credit line?" Frank asked. "She hasn't noticed that?" "Nope. I changed all her passwords and redirected her bank alerts. By the time she figures it out, I'll be established in Florida and she'll be stuck with an empty house and a maxed out line of credit. And our $50,000 will be rolled into the new mortgage?" Barbara again, confirming my suspicions about their involvement. "Yep. Kelsey's contact at the mortgage company says we can do a cash-out refinance before the sale. Alyssa's credit score is excellent, so approval should be automatic. She won't even need to be there to sign. I've got that covered." They all laughed. My husband and in-laws, laughing about defrauding me, stealing my home, and leaving me with their debt. I stopped the recording, feeling physically ill. The people I'd been living with, one of whom I'd married, were plotting to destroy me financially and emotionally. And they were doing it while eating my food, sleeping in my house, and pretending to be family. I needed help, professional help. I spent the rest of the day researching attorneys while pretending to do charting for work. I found a lawyer specializing in identity theft and financial fraud who could see me first thing tomorrow morning. Her reviews were excellent, with several clients specifically mentioning her work on cases involving family members. That night, I played the role of oblivious wife perfectly. I made dinner, smiled at Barbara's criticisms, and nodded at Frank's political rants. I even cuddled with Jason on the couch while watching a movie, fighting the urge to recoil every time he touched me. "I love you," he whispered at one point, kissing my forehead. "I love you too," I lied, wondering how I'd ever believed those words from him. The next morning, I told Jason I had an early shift and left the house at 6 a.m. Instead of going to the hospital, I went straight to the attorney's office. Her name was Vivian Chen, and she listened without interruption as I laid out everything I'd discovered. I showed her the photos of the forged power of attorney, played the recorded conversation from the coffee shop, and provided statements showing the unauthorized transfers from our accounts. "This is serious," she said when I finished, her expression grave. "Multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, theft, forgery, and the real estate listing with a fraudulent power of attorney. That's a felony. What should I do? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I was facing. First, we need to protect your assets and identity, she said, already typing on her computer. I'm going to file for an emergency financial freeze that will temporarily halt any transactions involving your jointly held assets. Then we'll file for divorce citing fraud and identity theft. Divorce. The word felt strange in my mouth, even though I'd been thinking it. Yes, your husband is committing crimes against you, Mrs. Miller. This marriage is not salvageable. Her directness was refreshing after weeks of deception and manipulation. She was right, of course. I nodded, accepting the inevitable end of my marriage. We'll also file eviction proceedings against your in-laws. They've established tenancy by staying over 30 days. But we have clear evidence of their participation in fraud, which will expedite the process. By the end of the day, Vivian had filed an emergency petition with the court. By the following afternoon, we had a signed order freezing all joint accounts and placing a fraud alert on my credit. We also filed a divorce petition and eviction proceedings against Frank and Barbara. The legal system was responding with surprising efficiency to the clear evidence of fraud. Vivian also helped me contact the credit union where the fraudulent line of credit had been opened. They immediately froze the account and opened an investigation. We reported the fraudulent real estate listing as well, though it would take time for that to be removed. Don't go home yet, Vivian advised as our meeting concluded. Give me a day to get everything in place. We want all the legal protections active before they realize what's happening. I spent the afternoon in a coffee shop, jumping every time my phone buzzed. Jason texted several times, asking where I was and why I wasn't answering. I made excuses about a busy shift and emergency patients, maintaining the illusion that everything was normal while my world was being completely reconfigured. The next day, Vivian called. Everything's in place, she said, her confident tone providing a much-needed anchor in the chaos. The financial freeze is active, the divorce petition has been filed, and the eviction notice is ready to be served. I've also arranged for a process server to deliver the divorce papers this evening, and I've spoken with the police. They're taking the identity theft and fraud very seriously. What do I do now? I asked, my voice small despite my best efforts to sound strong. Go home, act normal, gather any additional evidence you can. The process server will come around 7 p.m. Once the papers are served, you don't have to pretend anymore. I drove home slowly, rehearsing my normal face in the rearview mirror. When I walked in, Jason was in the kitchen with Barbara, cooking dinner. Frank was on his new futon bed, watching TV at his usual excessive volume. There you are, Jason exclaimed, coming over to kiss me. I was getting worried. You weren't answering my texts. Sorry, I said, forcing a smile that I hoped appeared genuine. Crazy day. Multiple traumas came in right at shift change. He nodded sympathetically. Well, you're home now. Mom's making her famous spaghetti. I smiled at Barbara. Sounds great. I'm just going to change and wash up. In our bedroom, I found even more toolboxes had appeared. There was barely room to walk between the bed and the dresser. I changed quickly and went to my laptop, which I'd hidden in my closet that morning. I created a fake spreadsheet titled Grandma's Trust Distribution and left it open on the desktop before going back downstairs. During dinner, I mentioned casually that my grandmother had called. She's finally settling the family trust, I said, watching their reactions. She wanted my account information for the distribution. Jason's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Trust? What trust? I shrugged, twirling spaghetti around my fork with deliberate nonchalance. My grandparents set up a trust for all the grandkids years ago. It's finally being distributed now that Grandma's moving to assisted living. How much? Frank asked bluntly, earning a sharp look from Barbara. I pretended not to notice their sudden interest. Around $180,000 each, after taxes. Not life-changing, but a nice cushion. I was thinking we could pay off some of the mortgage. The look that passed between Jason and his parents was priceless. I could practically see the dollar signs in their eyes. The fictional inheritance had instantly become part of their calculations. When do you get it? Jason asked, trying to sound casual but unable to hide the eagerness in his voice. Next week, I think. The paperwork's all on my laptop. I need to fill out some forms tonight. After dinner, I excused myself to work on the trust paperwork. Through the mirroring software, I watched as Jason immediately called Kelsey. We need to delay the refinance, he was saying urgently. Alyssa's getting a huge inheritance next week, $180,000. If we wait, we can get that too. I smiled grimly. The fake inheritance had bought me time and revealed even more about their scheme. I spent the evening gathering more evidence, downloading conversations, taking photos of the toolboxes, and documenting everything. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of Jason's plan. The next evening, we were all sitting down to another of Barbara's spaghetti dinners, apparently her only specialty, when the doorbell rang. Jason got up to answer it. I heard voices at the door. Then Jason returned with a confused expression, holding a thick envelope. Some guy just served me papers, he said. Before he could open the envelope, the doorbell rang again. This time Barbara went to answer it. She came back white-faced, also holding an envelope. It's for us, she whispered to Frank. The doorbell rang a third time. Frank heaved himself off his chair, muttering about interruptions. He returned, looking looking like he'd seen a ghost, accompanied by 2 uniformed police officers. "Jason Miller?" one officer asked. Jason nodded, still holding his unopened envelope. "We have a warrant to search these premises for evidence of identity theft, fraud, and trafficking in stolen property." While Jason and his parents stood frozen, the officers began searching the house, focusing on the toolboxes in our bedroom and basement. I sat quietly at the table, continuing to eat my spaghetti as chaos erupted around me. The pasta was overcooked and the sauce was from a jar, but somehow it tasted like victory. "What is happening?" Barbara shrieked, finally opening her envelope. "An eviction notice? Jason, did you know about this?" Jason had opened his envelope too. "Divorce papers? Alyssa, what the hell?" I took another bite of spaghetti, chewing slowly. "You should read the part about the fraud charges, and the identity theft, and the forged power of attorney. It's all very interesting." Frank clutched his chest dramatically. "I'm having a heart attack. Call an ambulance." One of the officers looked over. "Sir, I'm a trained EMT. Your color is good, your breathing is normal, and you're putting weight on both legs evenly. You're not having a heart attack." Frank deflated, his medical emergency act falling flat. Jason lunged toward me, his face contorted with rage. "You bitch! What have you done?" The officer closest to him stepped between us. "Sir, I suggest you calm down. Threatening your wife won't help your current legal situation." "She's ruining everything," Jason shouted. "We had a plan." "Yes, you did," I said calmly. "A plan to steal my identity, sell my house, saddle me with your parents' debt, and run off to Florida with your ex-girlfriend." "I heard everything, Jason. I saw everything. The fake power of attorney, the credit line in my name, the one-way ticket to Tampa." The color drained from his face. "You went through my things? Just like you went through mine. Just like you took my passport and birth certificate. Just like you forged my signature and listed my house for sale without my knowledge." The officers continued their search, pulling tools from boxes and checking serial numbers against a list. "We've got matches," one called out. "These match the items reported stolen from the Henderson Hardware bankruptcy auction." So that's where the tools came from. They weren't even legitimately purchased. The next few hours were a blur. The officers confiscated all the tools as evidence. Jason alternated between raging at me and begging me to drop the charges. Frank faked 2 more medical emergencies, each less convincing than the last. Barbara cried and accused me of tearing apart their family. I sat at the kitchen table watching it all unfold with a strange sense of detachment. These people who had invaded my home and plotted to destroy my life were finally facing consequences. By midnight, the officers had finished their search and left with the evidence. They didn't arrest Jason or his parents. That would come later, they explained, after the investigation was complete. But they did issue stern warnings about not leaving town or attempting to access any frozen accounts. I spent the night in the guest bedroom, which I'd reclaimed by piling all of Frank and Barbara's belongings in the hallway. Jason slept on the couch, having been barred from our bedroom by the temporary restraining order included with the divorce papers. The next morning, things moved quickly. The realtor pulled the fraudulent listing after receiving notice from my attorney. The credit union permanently froze the fraudulent line of credit. A suspicious activity report was filed against Jason with all 3 credit bureaus. My HR department voided the forged leave request after I provided proof of identity theft. Jason tried to access our joint savings account and was denied. This sent him into another rage, and he stormed around the house, shouting about ungrateful wives and family loyalty. When he tried to take my car keys, claiming the car was half his, a deputy arrived to enforce the financial injunction. "Sir, all joint assets are frozen pending court proceedings," the deputy explained calmly. "You cannot take the vehicle without court approval." Jason's face turned an alarming shade of red. "This is my house too. You can't keep me from my own property." "Actually, we can," the deputy replied, handing Jason another document. "This is a temporary exclusion order. You need to gather essential personal items and vacate the premises within 1 hour." "Where am I supposed to go?" Jason demanded. The deputy shrugged. "That's not the court's concern, sir. Perhaps your parents can help you find accommodations." Frank and Barbara, who had been watching from the doorway, suddenly looked less smug. Their meal ticket was being cut off, and they were next on the eviction list. After Jason left with the deputy escorting him, I changed all the locks. I left his wedding ring in an envelope on the front porch with a note, "Property of the past." Then I packed 2 suitcases with everything I couldn't bear to lose and drove to my parents' house in Cincinnati. I spent the next 3 months rebuilding my life. Jason continued fighting the divorce proceedings for a while, filing multiple motions to delay the process, but eventually seemed to realize the evidence against him was overwhelming. The court granted me the house and all our joint assets, minus a small settlement to Jason that barely covered his legal fees. I didn't want to live in the house anymore, too many bad memories, so I rented it to a lovely couple, both travel nurses, whose rent payments cover the mortgage while I stay with my parents and save for a fresh start. Frank and Barbara signed a consent judgment for $28,000 to cover the funds they'd helped steal, plus legal fees. This amount was negotiated down from the full $50,000 plus they owed through a settlement agreement that allowed them to make payments over time rather than facing criminal charges. Last I heard, they were living in Frank's brother's basement in Indiana. Jason is facing felony fraud charges and possible jail time. As for me, I've repainted my reclaimed home office a soothing mint green. I've started an MSN program to advance my nursing career, and for the first time in months, I'm sleeping soundly through the night. The polite request for my in-laws to move out was the first domino. I never imagined it would expose an entire family's plan to exploit me, but in a strange way, I'm grateful. That request led me to discover the truth before it was too late, before I lost everything to people who saw me as nothing but a meal ticket and a good credit score. Sometimes I think about that closet where I hid to take work calls, surrounded by winter sweaters and shoes. It seems like a lifetime ago now. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm standing in the open, rebuilding my life on my terms, and it feels better than I ever imagined it could. I hope you guys enjoyed reading this. It took me a while to get it all out in an entertaining way. Thank you for helping, kind strangers.